Imagine the tension rippling through Miami Metro if Sergeant James Doakes, the one person who always saw Dexter Morgan's two perfect smiles, hadn't met his supposed end in that fateful cabin. Instead of going up in flames, what if Doakes survived? This alternate scenario rewrites a pivotal moment near the end of Season 2, creating a world where Dexter's deadliest hunter lives on, forcing every character's fate to unfold differently. Today, this story explores what might have happened if that single explosion had gone awry, leaving Doakes breathing, furious, and on a relentless quest for truth. The critical moment occurs at the cabin deep in the Florida Everglades, a remote place chosen for seclusion and dark secrets. Occasionally, it became a doomed location thanks to Lila's twisted act. In the show's timeline, her desperate attempt to protect Dexter results in an explosion that ends Doakes' life, conveniently tying up Dexter's biggest loose end. Yet here, the explosion fails to deliver a fatal blow. Flames erupt, but Doakes' special forces instincts kick in. He flings himself through a weakened sidewall, hitting the ground with a shattered rib and severe burns across his shoulder. The blaze consumes the evidence, pinning him as the Bay Harbor Butcher, but it fails to kill its intended target. James Doakes, gravely injured yet alive, lying in the mud and gasping for air while the cabin roars behind him. An outsider would have doubted anyone could survive such a blast. However, Doakes' entire life is a chain of improbable survival stories, from childhood in a tough Miami neighborhood to special operations missions overseas. His path is lined with near-death experiences. It's almost darkly comedic. There he is, battered by an explosion he never saw coming, still managing to slip away from what was supposed to be a pyrotechnic grave. A helicopter eventually spots him lying just past the tree line, and paramedics rush him to the hospital under heavy sedation, unaware they're carrying a man half the department believes to be the Bay Harbor Butcher. As soon as Doakes regains consciousness, a swirl of confusion bombards him. He recalls that Dexter Morgan had set him up to look like the notorious serial killer. He also remembers Lila's face, that impulsive glint in her eyes. Now the world thinks he died in the flames, leaving only ashes that presumably belonged to a man indicted by suspicious evidence. Yet he's not officially declared dead until the remains are fully processed. Meanwhile, he's kept under guard by local law enforcement who have no idea they're babysitting the actual victim of a frame job. The hospital staff might notice how he clenches his fists whenever he's asked about the explosion, or how he stares at the flickering overhead lights with grim determination, but they chalk it up to trauma. Back at Miami Metro, Dexter hears the news. The forensic team found signs someone escaped the cabin. That detail, initially brushed off, grows into a quiet rumor. Deborah Morgan overhears that no definitive remains of Doakes were located, meaning identification is inconclusive. She isn't sure whether to feel relief or panic. Meanwhile, LaGuerta grows suspicious of a scenario that just doesn't add up. She had always believed in Doakes' innocence, or at least questioned the straightforwardness of his alleged guilt. The lack of tangible proof at the crime scene rattles her more than she'll admit. She remembers how Doakes was never the type to hide from a fight, especially one with stakes as high as being labeled as a monstrous serial killer. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you for a small favor. If you like this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 99% of you watch the videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone subscribed. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, is it done? Great. Thank you so much. Doakes is alive, but under a cloud of official secrecy. The local cops coordinating with the hospital are uncertain if they're detaining a felon or protecting a victim. Unbeknownst to them, an FBI representative from the Bay Harbor Butcher Task Force is snooping around, eager to confirm the identity of the patient. In another life, Doakes might have welcomed help from federal agents, but here he can't trust anyone. Not after the kind of betrayal he suffered. So he fakes memory loss to buy time, playing the role of a confused burn victim, too disorientated to speak. Behind the scenes, he seethes with anger, waiting for a moment to escape or to contact someone he could trust. Meanwhile, Dexter grapples with an unsettling mix of fear and dark humor. The notion that his biggest threat might still be breathing ignites his anxieties. His entire master plan hinged on Doakes being gone. In quiet moments, he can't help picturing Doakes bursting into a police briefing, battered but alive, screaming that Dexter Morgan framed him. Yet Dexter tries to maintain his outward composure. He even makes a joke, albeit in his head, that fate must have a twisted sense of humor if it's letting the one man who calls him a creep slip away from a fatal explosion. As tension grows, Rita notices Dexter's edgy behavior. She sees him nervously checking his phone at odd hours and stepping outside to make cryptic calls. He's far too defensive whenever Deb asks about him. Rita's not fully aware of what's happening, but she senses Dexter is carrying a heavier burden than usual. She replays past moments when Dexter disappeared without a trace and wonders if he's sliding into bad habits again. For her, the unknown is more terrifying than the truth, especially since she never suspects how dire the situation truly is. Back in the hospital, Doakes finds his second unexpected ally, a low-level administrative worker who stumbles onto his actual identity. She recognizes him from prior police interactions, having seen him around the station or in the newspaper. Initially, she contemplates reporting him immediately, but an inner moral compass kicks in. She's aware the story of the Bay Harbor butcher isn't as open and shut as the department claims. Instead of ringing the alarm, she gives Doakes a chance to slip out when a shift change occurs. Her decision doesn't stem from sympathy alone. It's a silent belief that he deserves a shot to clear his name. James Doakes quietly vanishes from the hospital, tearing out his IV lines and staggering into the night like a wounded predator on the hunt. When word of his disappearance emerges, the entire department goes on high alert. Lundy, having previously led the Bay Harbor butcher investigation, is stunned. He'd prided himself on thoroughness, but never expected the prime suspect to simply vanish into the city. LaGuerta, though conflicted, seizes on this development. She points out that if Doakes had truly been behind these atrocities, would he run off half dead rather than confront the allegations? In the real timeline, she never had the chance to see Doakes exonerated. Here, his miraculous survival inspires her to dig deeper. Dark humor seeps in again as Dexter, who's rarely rattled, finds himself with a new kind of stage fright. He jokes silently that maybe this is a karmic punishment for all his ill-fated kills, forced to watch a ghost hobble through the city. He tries to track possible sightings of Doakes, anticipating the showdown that must come. The cat and mouse dynamic flips repeatedly. Doakes wants to gather evidence to reveal the Bay Harbor butcher, while Dexter wants to ensure Doakes doesn't appear at Miami Metro with a bulletproof case. Neither man can rest. If they do, the other might strike first. Time passes, and Doakes manages to contact LaGuerta. Their brief talk ends with an agreement to meet in a secret location near the old shipping yards. Over the phone, LaGuerta's voice is thick with relief and confusion, a mixture that triggers powerful memories of the partnership they once shared. At the rendezvous, he lays out everything was a frame job. He references details that only the real butcher would know, explaining how the slide trophies, the kill sites, and the circumstantial evidence all line up too perfectly to have originated from him. With unsteady hands, he presents a partial phone recording from the cabin, a piece of audio that survived on a device stashed in his duffel. It's muffled, but it captures Lila's voice during the moments before the explosion, speaking about Dexter in ominous, reverent tones. That's enough for LaGuerta to realize this fiasco is far from solved. She stands at a crossroads. Keep her loyalty to the department's version of events, or help Doakes prove his innocence. Old loyalty to her partner collides with her sense of duty. She begins to suspect that Dexter Morgan, the mild-mannered, blood-spatter analyst she's known for years, might be part of a bigger lie. Meanwhile, Deborah Morgan faces her own moral crucible. She notices that every conversation about Doakes' alleged crimes leaves Dexter uneasy. She stumbles on a clue about Lila's suspicious disappearance, recalling how that woman had an uncanny hold over Dexter at one point. Deb starts to connect the dots, maybe not fully concluding Dexter is a killer, but suspecting he's hiding truths that could burn the entire precinct. The darkness she's glimpsed in her brother, the same darkness Doakes used to call out, creeps closer to the surface. She finds herself in an impossible position. Does she protect the only family she truly has? Or does she uphold her duty as a detective? LaGuerta's next move is decisive. She seeks out Masuka for an off-the-record analysis of the partial audio from Doakes' duffel. He's not told the specifics, but he's intrigued by the chance to flex his forensic muscles. The result, however, confirmed there's more than just one voice in the recording. There's a distinct presence of someone referencing the name Dexter. With half a puzzle completed, LaGuerta sets out to gather more evidence. She suspects it will ignite a scandal that could destroy the reputation of Miami Metro and cast the entire Bay Harbor butcher case into doubt. The line between uncovering the truth and burying it becomes razor thin. As the storm builds, Doakes recovers enough to move around without limping. He's determined to flush Dexter out, but he also realizes that going fully public without ironclad proof will paint him as a rogue cop still under suspicion. A tinge of grim humor surfaces, the unstoppable soldier pinned as a lunatic by official reports. Late at night, when the city sleeps, he skulks around shipping containers, boat docks, anywhere Dexter might feel comfortable disposing of a new victim. He aims to catch that secret ritual in action, the same ceremony that nearly killed him. There's an odd satisfaction in turning those tables. Eventually, a confrontation seems inevitable. Doakes picks up faint chatter about Dexter investigating a new target near the city's deserted marina. He sees a silhouette that might be Dexter stepping into a small craft. Heart pounding, he readies himself to pounce, heartened by the possibility of clearing his name. Yet, the moment he reaches the water, he finds the vessel deserted, only with a swirl of footprints on the dock. It's a near miss that leaves both men simmering in frustration. They're locked in a silent war, each trying to outwit the other, each teetering on the edge of a final, violent resolution. When all roads seem to lead to an explosive standstill, LaGuerta uncovers a last piece of evidence, a meltdown from Lila's old artist loft that references a specific location. It corroborates Doakes' story about the cabin. She hurries to find him before he does anything drastic. Meanwhile, Dexter senses that time is running out. That sets the stage for a quiet but electrifying standoff. The department is close to realizing the frame. LaGuerta is close to exonerating Doakes, and Doakes is mere steps from cornering Dexter once and for all. The tension threatens to unravel everything Dexter has built: his family life with Rita, his relationships at Miami Metro, the protective shell of normalcy he's cultivated for years. The story reaches a turning point when Doakes and Dexter meet face to face under the swirling red glow of a harbor light. They're alone, each armed with knowledge and desperation. A bystander might call it a battle of unstoppable forces, but ironically, no direct fight erupts. Instead, Doakes steels himself, unwavering in his mission to reveal the true Bay Harbor Butcher to the world. Dexter stands there, momentarily stifled by the enormity of his double life about to implode. It's a silent confrontation that brims with finality. Then sirens pierce the distance. LaGuerta and Deb have arrived, guns at the ready, uncertain who to trust. In a believable conclusion, Doakes chooses to step forward and hand over enough evidence to publicly clear himself. He refuses to kill in cold blood, even now, staying true to the righteous side of his moral code. Dexter, cornered, can't rely on cunning illusions anymore. The dark humor is that if anyone had 9 lives in this scenario, it's not the serial killer. It's the sergeant who was once framed as a butcher. With the entire precinct closing in, tensions reach a fever pitch. LaGuerta holds her breath. Deb stands torn between her brother and her badge. Dexter finally faces the storm he orchestrated. The immediate aftermath leads to Doakes' name cleared and an internal inquiry that rocks Miami Metro. However, this isn't the neat ending everyone wants. Deb is left in a whirlwind of conflicting loyalties. On one side is the brother she loves and idolizes. On the other side is her unwavering commitment to the law that Doakes has come to represent. Deb, grappling with a choice. Does she help Dexter escape the final dragnet looming over him? Or does she stand with Doakes to let justice take its course? That moral dilemma lingers, and in that electrifying moment, fans of Dexter can only wonder which oath Deb will betray first. Her duty as a detective, or to her beloved yet deadly brother.